I'm David London, Executive Director from the ACI, and unfortunately, Asher has a little bit of a pinched nerve and is not able to make this evening. So first of all, I think we should all wish Asher Refuah Shlema, who Asher has been the driving force, and the Great Synagogue has been the driving force of this wonderful series that started about 5 years ago. And tonight, in honor of those some 5 years, we're having a little celebration, a little l'chaim after this program, with downstairs with a little wine, a little l'chaim in honor of David Harvard, who all these 5 years ago was the start of this wonderful series that we've been having, the Motzi Shabbat series that's been going on for 5 years, bringing you interesting and exciting subjects for us to learn, to grow, in many, many different areas. So again, I want to wish Asher a refuah shlema. He was not able to make it, and he really wanted to be here. As you know, tonight we are getting to hear a little over a month and a half ago, we had the honor of hosting a wonderful election evening with 8 of the political parties, and there was a young politician on the Yesh Latid list, and kind of not as high as we would like him to be. And he spoke beautifully, and it was very exciting. And he was running for the Knesset, one of the few Americans running for the Knesset, English speakers running for the Knesset. And we, as the polls announced, we didn't have high hopes that he was going to be on the list. But surprise, surprise, and he was able to get into the Knesset, and we're very excited to be introducing and welcoming Lipman, who's the first American-born Chaver Knesset in 30 years. So tonight, we should have a very interesting talk and listening from David from the Times of Israel and MK Lipman. Welcome.
Thank you, David. Can you hear me okay, everybody? Oh, yeah. Amazing, wonderful. So yes, let's join David in wishing Asher Refuah Shlema. This is the land where anything's possible. Fantastic. So, thank you all for coming. For what I hope will be the first of many Times of Israel anniversary events. Our website turned 1 year old a couple of weeks ago, and we thought what would be a nice way to mark timesofisrael.com, and I'll only say that like 5 to 10 times in the course of the evening. Also, Sarah, who is our social media person, tells me that I have to tell you that the Twitter something for this is hashtag TOI1. Is that good? No. TOI1. Hashtag TOI11. Okay, I don't know what that means, but it's very grateful that I tell you. Don wants me to tell you that there's a sheet going around, which if you put down your email address, will ensure you get updates from his office on a once a week or so basis. Okay, so we thought it would be lovely to speak in the Great Synagogue in English to the first American-born, I guess the first Anglo, right? The Brits. Do we even have a British-born member of Knesset, anybody? I think not, possibly. The first American-born member of Knesset in almost 30 years. It's a great turnout. Thank you for coming. We'll encourage us to do this kind of thing more often. Okay, so what I think we should do, Rabbi Lipman, first I should stress that the connection, I'm not saying the Times of Israel got used to the Knesset.
Can I say something about that?
You can say the Times of Israel got used to the Knesset if you like.
I do want to begin, first of all, obviously thanking everyone for coming, but the Times of Israel absolutely gave me a platform to be able to express my opinions about so many topics. And I won't say it got me into Knesset, but certainly gave me the ability to share my opinions with thousands of people, and I really thank you for that. I really do.
Good. I should stress we're an equal opportunity political platform there. So any other Knesset members or would-be Knesset members in the audience, you can vote for us as well, and it's worked very well for Rabbi Lipman. So I think we talk about sort of where you came from, how you got into this, I think remarkable ride. I'll give away one little minor political detail, which to me is astonishing. You met David for the first time last July. And we'll come back and see how you got to that and where you're going with it now. That just gives you, again, proof of, in this country, anything is possible. So a little bit about where you came from, how you got into politics, and within the limitations of the fact that we don't head of coalition, I'm going to try and ask you what you want to do with the fact that you're now one of the potentially esteemed 120. Okay, so you, first of all, you made a up in Maryland 8 years ago. You're married to Dina, 4 kids, 3 girls and a boy?
Yes.
Okay, 3 girls. Well, you live in that church. So what were you doing in Maryland first, and then we'll come to Israel?
Okay, I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland. Oh, good.
So there's 3 people here from Silver Spring.
Let me just give a little bit of kavod. My mother is sitting right over there, so I guess the story starts there.
What are stories then?
Moved back with my wife Dina and started our family in Silver Spring. We were in Cincinnati for a few years, then we were in Silver Spring. I was teaching at the Hebrew Academy in Silver Spring, and the entire school went on a trip to Israel. And something while we were here, we always talked about the possibility of moving to Israel. But somehow while we were here, I guess our son at that time was 6, and we just looked at each other and we said we have to try to find a way to get here. I was offered a job at the yeshiva here in Synagogue in Beit Shemesh. We chose Beit Shemesh, and this is an important part of the story. We chose Beit Shemesh because Beit Shemesh has such a diverse population of Jews, from secular to Sephardic, Masorti, Russians, Ethiopians, English speakers, Haredim, and we wanted our children to see how all types of Jews can get along and live together in perfect harmony. That was the reason why we moved to Beit Shemesh. And we, as I mentioned in my opening speech to the Knesset, when we got to the Nefesh to Nefesh flight, and again, that experience, if people in this room have had it, was really remarkable. There was the thought of being in Israeli politics or being a member of Knesset was not anywhere on the radar screen. It wasn't the direction. I'm an educator, and I thought that I'd be teaching for the next 20, 30 years. And I had thoughts in the back of my mind, maybe one day to get involved in the Ministry of Education and impact curriculum in the country. That was really my thought. We came to Beit Shemesh though, and very quickly realized that my courses had taken me a different way.
Okay, so let's go to that. First, I want to do the equivalent and give some kavod, because my mother is here in the audience as well. And when they made that job some years after I did, they moved, my mom and my stepfather moved to Beit Shemesh. And now they're in Jerusalem. So I don't really want to make it that. But, okay, so you're in Beit Shemesh, and the Holy Land and the Promised Land are not quite as perfect as you thought they might be.
Not quite as perfect. First of all, I'm always very careful to say this, we moved to a remarkable country. I mean, to think what was accomplished, and at that point it was 56 years, and a functioning country doing so much for the world and for the Jewish people, remarkable. But like you said, we did notice flaws as well, and the real story, which has now become somewhat known, a few months after we moved, I was in my office at home learning, and we heard a commotion outside, and I went outside to see what was happening, and there were 3 police cars on our street corner, and I went to a policeman and I said, what's going on? And he says to me, run, tivrach miyad. And I said, why? Before I had a chance to answer, this hailstorm of rocks came flying down on us, and I actually got hit in the leg by a rock, and was bleeding, and went home. And the story behind why the rocks were thrown is not so significant. There was a demonstration going on about grave desecration somewhere, not in Beit Shemesh, and they were blocking the road, and the police were there to make sure the road wasn't blocked, and the police were the ones who were the target of the stoning. And I got hit, and I was thinking to myself, a rock was thrown at me by a fellow Jew, and this is not making headlines. The next morning, you didn't see all over the newspapers, oh my goodness, the greatest travesty imaginable happened, a rock was thrown by a Jew. And that's when I realized that we have real societal issues. Even though the number of people who would actually harm someone, be violent towards someone is very, very low. It's a very small percentage. Certainly the average Haredi you see on the street would be a loving personality towards other Jews and would never even think of being violent. But the fact that it's allowed, that it can happen, made me realize that there's something deeper going on over here. And I looked at my wife and I said that we have to find a way to get involved and do something about it.
Okay, but you didn't think, right, that's it, I'm gonna have to go for the class. You said, I mean, obviously, you're by the way, you're an inspiration. I mean, we should obviously, get involved if you can. I think that's a commendable thing. But you started doing it at the local level.
Yeah, my first step was a very naive step, and I figured that I'm coming from the yeshiva world, my yeshiva background. Maybe I could be a sheriff, I could be a mediator between the communities, between the extremist community and the rest of the community. I learned very quickly that that wasn't.
Let me stop you something on that, because I think it's interesting, and something I actually mentioned as we were coming in tonight. You consider yourself who you are, Haredi. Do Israeli Haredi consider you Haredi? Are you somehow not Haredi because of something? And then we'll come together.
Well, if Haredi means not Zionist, not willing to wear a blue shirt, not willing to play ball with their kids, not willing to have your kids have general studies, and the like, then I'm not Haredi. If Haredi means Chareid D'var Hashem, my wife and I are very careful about Shirat HaMitzvot, and we're very strict with our kids. Not strict, it's a harsh word, but we're careful about what our children see, what comes into our home. Certainly, we do raise them. We have raised them with gender separation to an extent. That's where a product of the yeshiva world. That's the way I see it. Haredi is very broad. I got emails. I just got one on the way here from an organization, a Haredi organization that helps Haredi get to work. And I'll talk about that later tonight. And they said, thank you so much for being the true Haredi representative of the Knesset. So there are Israeli Haredis also who are starting to realize that there's a role that I can play in terms of the moderate Haredi community, and they don't have representation in the Knesset. And over time, I think more and more, as they begin to realize who their ear is, what Yeshatid is, who I am, I think we'll see that build even more.
Okay, so we'll come back to that. Second, now talk us through the sort of local political actions that you took.
The first thing that I did in terms of actual politics, after I realized that I could not be mediator, that the extremist community had no interest in Hitabrut, they had no interest in talking, in conversation, they told me that we have learned in Yerushalayim that the way to get things done for our agenda is to be violent, is derech milchama, and therefore we're going to keep doing that, and we'll beat you too.
Again, really this is a fringe element? Well, this is the fringe representation of this world. How do you categorize that?
The people who are talking those terminologies are fringe. And it's very important. I always feel the need to say that. I always talk about Kitzonit, but never talk about Haredi. And there are Kitzonit who would be that way, but there was, and when we get to the story of Beit Shemesh, there was a silence from the broader Haredi leadership, which was a concern. But I would never put those words in the mouths of the average Haredi. So I turned to, there was a deputy mayor of Beit Shemesh, who was an English speaker, shallow learner, and he deserves the credit for what he did. I made an appointment with him. And it's just funny now, looking back, 8 years ago, it was actually 7 years ago, the fear that I had of walking into City Hall of Beit Shemesh, and oh my goodness, I'm going to be the deputy mayor of Beit Shemesh, and I was so nervous, and well, I see the right words, it was scary for me. And I went in and I said to Shalom that I want to help. I want to get involved. And he said to me, I wish I had a tape recorder to hear those words. He said, as deputy mayor, all you get is either complaints or help me. Never has no one has ever walked in and said, how can I help you? And he grabbed it and he gave me projects to work on in Beit Shemesh, and I started to get a taste of what politics are like. It was a very negative taste, by the way. I saw a lot of the corruption, a lot of the dirty aspect of the politics, and actually was not able to move forward with a lot of the projects and ideas that I had because of that corruption in politics. That was my first step, was an assistant, a voluntary assistant to the deputy mayor of Beit Shemesh.
And some specifics. I mean, I did a very long interview with Dov a few weeks ago. Actually, the longest article, you'd never published at the time, so it was possibly the longest article I've ever put my name to. It's about 12,000 words, but we talked through a lot of these things. You spoke about Ethiopia, treatment of Ethiopians, that should have been very grueling to you. And you'd been in Israel in 91, I guess, when Operation Solomon happened.
Yeah, I was in Yeshiva in Merkaz Torah in Tapiot when Operation Solomon, and they were literally brought from the airport to the Diplomat Hotel, which is just a few blocks away from Yeshiva. So I would go every day for 2-3 hours in the break to volunteer with the Ethiopians. I came and I saw the hope and the dreams in their eyes. It was just something which I wish we could just bottle up and all of us could carry with us everywhere, because for them this was absolute geulah. And to see in Beit Shemesh how downtrodden they are and lack of hope, and I feel bad saying it, by a certain level of racism that they're experiencing, I tried to get involved in that and help with that as well. We made progress, but again, as you get involved on a grassroots level, on a local level, you start seeing how real change ultimately happens in the government, in the Mevshala, in the Knesset, through laws, and that's the only way you can really change things.
So does that mean local council, local government politics can't actually achieve anything? And what happened with the Bet Shemesh process?
You can take baby steps for sure. I wouldn't say we didn't accomplish. Just to give you an example, there was a secular school in Rabbi a high-level, talented, gifted school, which they wanted to close down for no other reason than they felt that they didn't want to have that school in Rabbi and the clientele didn't need it. But from my perspective, the notion that we want to close down one secular school in Rabbi Shemesh, even if the students are largely coming from outside of Rabbi Shemesh, it was such a negative message for us as religious Jews to be sending to the secular community. So I got involved. I was the one religious person in the secular group, and we won that. So we were able to maneuver and get that done, and the school is still there. That was my first example for myself, where I realized that working together is the way to get things done. Like each sector working for themselves is just destroying us. And here, I was able to cross over and bring some other religious Jews to that fight, and we were able to win. That was my first example of how you can succeed if you really do bring a broad coalition together. So there were small successes here and there.
He ran from that, right? Your deputy
He ran for mayor. That's my next involvement was the elections, the 2008 municipal elections. I was essentially a campaign manager for Shalom. Learned a lot about politics during an election, about what works, what doesn't work. But I had a story a week before the election. So we were running against the candidate from Shas, who's now the mayor of Beit Shemesh, Moshe Buttel. And a week before the election, the Rabbi Yosef came to Beit Shemesh. And I went to see, do that fly on the wall and see what happens. We were in a gymnasium. There were thousands of, it wasn't Charedim, it was secular people from Old Beit Shemesh. The Rabbi came in and got all the kavod which Magielo, he's a Gadol Torah, and he was sitting there, and towards the end of his words, he said, to anybody who votes for Moshe Buttel next week, I promise you the world to come. And I was sitting there, and I realized at that moment that we lost, because I can't really promise that. I couldn't come through with that campaign promise. And but it also made me realize how rotten the connection between religion and politics has become in Israel, because there should be no place for that. People should be able to vote as they want to vote and not be swayed. Sure enough, the next week, a few thousand not religious people in Beit Shemesh voted for Moshe Buttel, the promise the world to come, and we lost by about 3,500 votes. So that really was very much a turning point in the election. And again, it was another step in my evolving, understanding how corrupt things have become.
You know? I mean, so the rabbi comes and says that you don't have to fall for that.
Well, yeah, but I think that, listen, they come from a culture, and it's something which I respect. That the rabbi is a very special figure, and what he says means something, and I value that. One of the beauties of Israel is you can have people who are outwardly, externally, look so secular. You never imagine, but for all I know, these people, again, it taught another lesson about not judging people by the externals, which we still do. They're spiritual people, and this is their rabbi, and it's not for me to judge their decision or not. It just made me realize, again, at a Torah level, coming from a rabbinic background, I just think it's wrong. I can't blame the people, I blame the rabbinic side for taking advantage, I think, of people in that way.
So that local experiment failed, but you didn't give up on the political activism.
No, in fact, after the mayor of Moshe Buttel won, a few weeks later, he was sitting next to his spokesman, the city spokesman, who said, in front of the cameras, it's up on YouTube, you can see it, he said that our plan is to turn Beit Shemesh into the largest Haredi city in Israel. Our plan is to take over Bnei Brak. And from my perspective, this is so important to clarify what I mean when I say this. I have nothing against, it's not anti-Haredi, it's why take a city where Haredim and non-Haredim, for the most part, got along for a long time together. There was a Kriyah Haredit Nachal Melucha in Beit Shemesh. There were never issues. They understood they were moving to Beit Shemesh. This is not Mea Shari. And they respected the fact that there are other types of people, other types of Jews who are living there. The moment you say, I'm turning the city into a Haredi city, so now all of a sudden, everybody's mind shifts. And certainly the extremists can flex their muscles and they say, wait a minute, if it's a Haredi city, so why is this woman jogging on my street? Whereas beforehand they wouldn't have thought that because they knew they were a big church. If it's a Haredi city, so why is there a school with an Israeli flag going up on the block? And all these tensions started developing after the elections. Then I became a real activist, arranging demonstrations, writing columns, Hebrew column, a local paper every week, and really try to save the city from the direction it was going in. Make sure there was construction for everyone, for Haredim and for non-Haredim. And we were literally on a week-to-week basis putting out fires left and right. And again, I learned from that process that you can arrange all the demonstrations you want, you can write all the columns you want, but as long as the Minister of Housing was from Shas, and the Minister of Interior was from Shas, and the Mayor was from Shas, and there was a coalition agreement. Line 57 of the Likud Degel Torah agreement said benefits for construction in Beit Shemesh for Haredim. I realized that was really rotten from the top, and that's where real change has to happen.
And so you thought, at this point in this time, I'm going to become politically active as the sort of central piece of my life, or you thought, if I'm going to do any political activism, it has to be an emotional level?
At that point, things were really shifting. I find myself teaching, and my mind was thinking about what I'm doing as soon as I finish teaching because of the issue that came up today in local politics. So I realized that there was a shift going on. I didn't know that I was going to be either an official member of either the local council or certainly not the Knesset, but I knew that I was shifting towards focusing on my life and trying to solve these problems, that's for sure. I also saw the rift that was happening between communities, and I felt that even though I couldn't get the extremists to talk, I felt that maybe there's still some hope in trying to bridge those gaps somehow and have some kind of a multiple.
And then you came across I suppose, maverick Shas Knesset member, Chaim Amsalem, who had basically broken ranks with his party because he was saying trying to interest in the army and it was taking a different approach, and you hooked up with him, right?
Yeah, one Shabbat afternoon, I sat down with the Jerusalem Post, and there was an interview, David Hart's interview with Rabbi Amsalem, and the headline said something about Shas and Kev. And I told my wife, I said, I'm sorry, it's Shabbat, I'm about to get really angry. Because I thought that I was just going to read an interview with someone, I didn't know anything about him. And message after message in that interview spoke to me, both in terms of Haredim joining the workforce, Haredim serving the army, changes in the rabbinate. Every message that spoke to me, and that night I sat down and I wrote an email to his office, and I said I wanted to have a meeting. Took some time, but I got a response. And I had the 10 minutes that I don't give to other people. I had my 10 minutes to make my case, and he said, listen, you want to help, bring me to Beit Shemesh, I'll speak at Beit Shemesh, and let's see what happens. So I went to Beit Shemesh, and that was a very successful event. And little by little, it became very close to the point that I was really in his inner circle as he was planning a run for the next Knesset. And it was an exciting time just to get involved. I was at the Knesset often, meeting with him, meeting with other people. And I believe that we were sharing a very important message, which everywhere we went, Israelis were very excited about that message.
So how is it that flash forward? He's not a Knesset, you're not associated with him. I mean, he seemed to have really touched a chord. And I think a few months before the elections, there was quite a widespread sense that he had a good chance of getting in, and that there were a lot of people who were from the sort of Shas world but were very disappointed with what Shas was doing, and that there were a lot of other people who weren't from that world who appreciated something from that world who was signaling in a different direction, and yet it didn't quite pan out.
I'm still friendly terms with him. There wasn't any kind of personal breakup. Essentially, the movement is not just the person, there's other people around. And unfortunately, from my perspective, there were people who were driving it away from the vision. The vision was Am Shalem, this beautiful coming together of religious and non-religious, men and women, Ethiopians, Russians, and I look around me and they weren't there. And I felt that
his activists were all from his original constituency, shall we say.
For the most part. And I felt that I was being misleading as I traveled around and I was talking about this vision, but I didn't really have I couldn't show them. It doesn't materialize it. There were other activists at the same time that I left Am Shalem, that left as well, and we wished him well, and I hoped that he would get to the Knesset. Really, it's not a personal issue, but at the same time, one of my agenda items, or a number of my agenda items as an Knesset now, very much relate to the Am Shalem agenda, that's for sure.
Okay, so that wasn't working out, so you just said, oh yeah, the baby's back.
Not exactly. I left Am Shalem, I didn't know the direction that I would go in. One of the biggest concerns, and during the last year of Beit Shemesh, everyone in the room knows the story, that we had significant extremism and an a daily basis. I was there on the street of Herzog trying to help these little girls who were just trying to get to and from school. It wasn't a one-time event, it was over a long period of time. And I tried everywhere I could. I got to the level, no one really wanted to help. That was the moment when the switch went off in my head, and I said, wow, I really would like to be a member of Knesset. I'd like that opportunity, or to be involved in a party in the Knesset. Beit Shemesh needs an address in the Knesset. That was my number one concern, because I knew there was going to be new elections, and no one was helping us. No one was helping our city. So I began looking around, and I can honestly tell everyone here that Yair Lapid was not on my radar screen. I didn't know very much about him. Anything I had heard about him, I'd say was negative. Just what I heard, not based on any facts. Let's remember that his show that he was known for in Israeli society was on Friday nights. I never saw him in action, and I wasn't really considering it. Good family friend, Elisa. Where's Elisa? Elisa Coleman was down my chief of staff. Elisa sent me a link and said, you have to watch this video. And everyone here, no matter what your political affiliation, if you want to understand Yair Lapid a little bit, you should watch. It's called Yair Lapid at Kiryat Ono. It's a Hebrew speech, but there's subtitles. Yair Lapid, a secular icon in Israel, stood up. This is before he announced he was going into politics, but he knew he was going to go into politics. But he met with a group of Haredi students in Kiryat Ono. So he's speaking to all Haredim. And he stood up and he said two words which ring in my head all the time. He said, Atem nitzachtem. Looking at the Haredim, he said, you've won. What did he mean? He said when the country was founded, there's no doubt there was a battle over what Israel was going to look like. Would it be a secular country? The secular founders of Israel, people who, I don't want to be misunderstood, I revere them for the initiative and the courage and the vision to start the country, but they had a very secular agenda. Their goal was a new Jew, a new Judaism, devoid of Torah and mitzvah. And the Dati and Haredi side was fighting that we should have Torah, and that's the basis of being here. Yair stood up in his speech and he said, Atem nitzachtem. You won. You have shown us that there is no basis for us to be in this land without God, without Tanakh, without our rich history. And he said, so now let's work together. Let's work together now and let's make this a great country. And when I saw this speech, I literally had this image in my mind of this hand from the secular side, and reaching out. Like here it is, a secular leader, a big player on the national scene. And I felt like it was our responsibility to come in and grab it, and if no one else is going to do it, so I'll do it. And I said to myself, you know what? Yair was talking to Haredim. This is politics, right? You speak to the crowd. Maybe you just somehow wanted their support. So I went to hear him speak, and this is, he already announced that he was in politics. I went to hear him speak in a Hillary location, completely secular, to hear him give the same message. And he absolutely was consistent. It was the same message. He told people, if you're looking for a replacement for my father, who he loved dearly and certainly misses dearly, but he said, I'm not my father. And that's not who you'll get in Yair Lapid in politics. And then he laid out his 5-point plan for what he wanted to change in the country. And again, every single one of those issues spoke to me.
How do you go down with the Haredi audience? I mean, here's this guy coming to them and telling them, you won, but I actually want to change a lot of the parameters. How was he received?
Receptive. I mean, you couldn't really tell from the video. You saw people listening. You couldn't really tell how they reacted to it. But I have seen him dealing with Haredim in general. They're very interested in hearing what he has to say, because they're trying to get their hands around it. Exactly what it is that he's asking for. We'll talk about that in terms of the plans. So I sent an email to his team. And at that point, it was a small little back office in a law firm, 3 volunteers. Got to the point where it was a much bigger operation. And I said, I want to help. I didn't talk about running for Knesset. I said, I want to get involved. They were definitely nervous. What is this guy who looks like me asking to get involved and help? They didn't know exactly what that was about. They sent us an arrangement to Beit Shemesh, very similar to Rabbi Salman's response. And we did that. And then afterwards, I had my first sitting down.
A palm meeting that you invited.
Yeah, we had a whole big Shemesh party, 100 people came from different backgrounds. And then afterwards, I was told that I would meet with Yair afterwards. The idea was that I would establish the branch for Yeshiva to Beit Shemesh, and before Yair gives over the samchiyot, the control, to someone to say, here, you're my representative in the city, he wanted to get to know me a little bit. So after that event, we sat and talked together for quite a while, and it was a remarkable month. It was really beyond politics. There was something personal that we felt on a number of levels. First of all, he's a secular person sort of reaching out beyond his natural boundaries. I'm coming from my side, reaching out beyond my boundaries. His father passed away for the last few years, and he was very close to him and had a big impact on his life. And my father also passed away the last few years, and so we talked about that. Both of us are. His father was a Holocaust survivor. My grandparents survived the Holocaust, so there were a lot of commonalities. He thinks like a Western. He has a Western mind, so he's very familiar with our culture, with music, with other forms of entertainment I grew up with, so we were able to talk about some of those things. And we just connected. And so I started the Open Branch of the church. That was the first
when? That was last summer.
in the summer.
Okay, and then you became more and more involved in the campaign?
Yeah, I got more involved. I started going to some events. And then they sent me an email and they said, Dove, we'd like you to send us your resume. And also more about yourself. And I'll never forget these words. They said, and don't be modest. Sell yourself. So that's when I realized that this was shifting from just running the Chemish branch and helping to they were actually considering me to be a candidate for council. Then October 17th, I'll never forget the date. I had the coffee with Yair in a coffee house in Ramat Aviv in Tel Aviv. He asked to speak in English. It was very interesting, which on a certain level worked to my advantage because I was able to I speak Hebrew, I was able to express myself certainly much more from the heart. And his English is remarkable. I didn't know about it, and I heard about it, but I experienced it during that meeting. He's completely fluent. Even cliches and certain terminologies I wouldn't expect an Israeli to know, certain slang as well. And he told me right there, he said, he asked me to look into the eyes and really commit that I'm going to be on board with the party. And I told him that my word's my word, and we went through the issues that might have been complicated, and I told him the issues that I agreed with. We shook hands, and he told me straight the range that my spot would be, and that's what it was. I mean, it ended up being 17, which was definitely within that range. And
Some no chance getting in first. 17.
That's
what I looked at the time.
Right, well, yes and no. He told me, there's three different personalities here. Yair told me he does believe there's a very good chance. He got up and had us talk about 22 seats. There's a fellow named Mark Melvin who really plays a role in all this that most people don't know about. He's an American guy, lives in Georgetown, his kids go to Hebrew Academy, he's a religious guy, and he was the internal pollster and strategist for Yesh Atid. When we finally had the list, he said to us, if you follow exactly what I'm saying, follow it, and if you hear at the Greek Synagogue for the debate, and that's what I did. He said, if you follow it, he said, you are going to get close to 20 seats. He said, doesn't matter. He said, what about Zippy Lipman? Doesn't matter. He said, if you follow these things, you'll get close to 20. And on the night of the elections, which we'll talk about soon, he was in a little corner drinking by himself, nobody even talking to him, and I went over and we had a real nice chat. So he really believed him. I did not think I was going to be a member of Knesset. I did it, and I was fine with it. I was at peace with that. I knew that if you're in the top 20, I would have a role. A major part of our platform is the Haredi issue, and I figured that I'd be part of shaping that, which I really wanted to do. I wanted to have that influence and helping to shape these programs. It's not anti-Haredi at all, it's very pro-Haredi if you study exactly what we asked you for. And that's what I figured it would be. I really didn't think that I was going to end up being a member of Knesset. This will work, for sure.
And then, on that night?
Then, the night before the elections, I got a phone call from the newspaper saying, we're going to report you tomorrow as being a realistic spot. I'll be honest with you, during the campaign, especially in the last 2 weeks, you felt something building. You felt something building. Even here at the Great Synagogue, I won't tell you who, but there's a very prominent person who was on the stage with me, who told me afterwards, he said, if I wasn't in the party I'm in, I'm voting HT, because you convinced me. And that was the feeling everywhere we went, we felt a certain momentum building.
He worked very hard, right? He pounded the country.
Yeah. Let's remember, under the radar screen, for a year, this man gave up. It's important for people to understand this. Yair, before he got to politics, had the life. He was making amounts of money which is way beyond what he would make even as a government minister. Way beyond. I'm talking 3 times, way beyond. He had to work 2 days a week essentially. Friday night he had a show and he wrote a column for Yediot Achronot. He's not a person who needed the kavod. Trust me, I walked the street with this man. He had everything. He had everything you could want. And he really did it because he cared about the country. Every single night he was out. Every night. Going to a different place. It started out with groups of 30 people at a time. Then it went up to 60, then 100, then 300. They got to the point where 400 and more. Every single night, and share the exact same message. I was there for a number of them, the same message over and over again to reveal from him. He really did sacrifice a lot. And when you do that, anybody who understands campaigns or elections, it makes a difference. You get to groups, people talk about it, people get excited about it. We reached a point where we had over 100 branches in the country and 50,000 volunteers. Election day itself, by the way, it's mikubal, it's accepted in Israeli society that people actually get paid to work on election day, to volunteer. We'd be a new one. Everybody was volunteers, so there's a big difference from what happens. So I got the phone call saying that we've become realistic. In that moment, everything shifted for me. I dropped everything, and I went to the kotel. And I poured my heart out. I really did. What an opportunity to be on the cusp of possibly being a member of Knesset. And I sent Yair a text message. Yair and I have talked about spiritual things. We talk about God. We talk about real things. So I sent a text message saying that I'm at the kotel. I'm davening for you. I'm davening for the party. I'm davening for myself. And he's always very responsive, but this time the response came within 5 seconds. I was number 17 on the list. Boaz Toporowski was number 18 on the list. Yair sent me a text message, which I'm going to frame and put on the wall in my office. He wrote, Itcha kfar sagarti, achshav ani oved al Toporowski. You're already a done deal, now I'm working on number 18. And it was just a remarkable moment where he just had this feeling as well. The next day, we felt it in the air. I traveled around Beit Shemesh, Jerusalem, Modi'in. We felt it in the polling places, the excitement in the air. And then late afternoon, they called me from the national headquarters, and they told me that when I get there tonight, the press is going to be all over me because their polls are saying that we're going to get 17 seats, and since I'm the last one, I'll be the focus. So, thank God we got 19, and Bernie Hoffman got to do all the press events that night. But it was really a remarkable night of celebration and just appreciating that something of tremendous magnitude was happening.
I want to talk to you about some substantive issues now. Within, there are certain delicacies because, as we know, the commission is not closed. But I especially want to focus on the issue of the ultra-Orthodox, of the Haredi norm that has emerged in Israel, and how authentic or inauthentic that is, and what we can do about it. And you are now in this strange position of coming into the Knesset with a centrist party whose leader is the son of somebody who was perceived to be hostile to Orthodox Judaism. You come from a very serious Orthodox Jewish background. You're essentially saying to the political representatives of that community, guys, you have, correct me, I don't want the words into your mouth. You've betrayed Judaism. This is not authentic Orthodox Judaism. Orthodox Judaism is the imperative to educate your children so they can provide for their families. You are pushing people away from Judaism. How do you see this playing out? What is your interaction with political leaders who have not been challenged from within their camp, if you like? And how much impact do you seriously believe you're going to be able to have?
So it was a very interesting change. The morning after the election, I was on Kol Barama, which is a Haredi radio station under the control of Shas. And during the election, I went out often, and I knew each time that it was going to be a real beatdown experience. They were very rough with me, and I stood my ground about the issues, but they were never very positive. The next morning, they introduced me. They said, "Kavod, Harav, Haredi." The tone turned very quickly because they realized now all of a sudden we have a Haredi member of Knesset in another party. I do believe that the Haredi political leadership does not represent the needs of the Haredi community. I really do believe that very deeply. That has played out in the Knesset. Every time we're in session, they prove that even further in the way they talk from the Knesset podium. It's a talk that's divisive. Again, I'm emphasizing very clearly the political leadership. I want everybody to understand that I'm not talking about...
We've got the extremists and we've got the political leadership. Yes. They're not the representatives
Correct.
of this community.
I think that they've only been looking out how can we get budgets for our institutions. Not in the number of
slavish, more than ever.
If you look at the growth of the Haredi population, compared to their lack of growth in the Knesset, I think it says otherwise.
Do you think that there are members of the ultra-Orthodox community
Let me put it.
who voted Yesh Atid?
Yes.
You think Yesh Atid got lots of Haredi votes?
I didn't say lots. But they definitely are. There's a Haredi leader who I would talk to on a regular basis who told me during the campaign that we're going to save the Haredi community for themselves. That's the issue she's going to do, and we need that to happen. The Haredi community is very complex, obviously. We're talking about decades of a system which has developed. But yes, an ideology which says that it's not ideal to go join the workforce is foreign to Torah Judaism. An ideology which says we're not part of the broader Jewish society is foreign to Torah Judaism. And that's something which has happened. I think that, from my perspective, the princes of the Jewish people aren't the people who sit back in their Torah day and night, but it's the person who finds the time on the train from Exchange to Tel Aviv to learn on his way to work. He finds the time to squeeze a mincha when time it's not convenient for him. Who comes home after a long day of work and goes out to go to a shiur. Now, those are the princes of Torah Judaism. And we've done a real disservice because now any young Haredi who leaves his yeshiva to go to work feels like he's a second-class citizen. He's not Haredi. He's not upstanding in Torah. And we have to change that. And that's something which I very much want to bring to the table, and I see it happening. We're on Tuesday. There's something in the Knesset called Shdulot, which are task forces, essentially. So I started a task force in the Knesset to help Haredim get to the job market. Can you imagine? Not one Haredi part, they haven't done that. Right? It's all about how do we protect the yeshiva, how do we protect the guys who are learning day and night. What about the guys who aren't learning day and night? What about the average, the normal, or the average? A Haredi boy is not capable of learning Torah day and night the rest of his life. What about him?
But didn't we do this to them because we've made it, if you didn't serve in the army, you couldn't join the workforce till you turned 30?
The broader Israeli society is responsible for helping this happen. That's part of why, in our plan for the Haredim serving in the Army or National Service, the first 5 years, nothing really happens, and the Haredim are free to just go to work. And a lot of people on the secular side say, why is that fair? Why should they need to go to work and we can't? And the answer is because we let this happen. We let this happen, and now we have to free them to go to work for the first 5 years, and then afterwards, the service will be
At what age, in other words?
18. When you're in the draft years.
Once you turn 18, nobody's going to stop you going to work, even if you haven't done.
Correct. For the next 5 years. And that's
if that turns out to be the government policy.
if that happens. That's our position. That's what we were demanding. Now, this shula, this task force that we're starting, it's Tuesday morning is the kickoff. If anybody wants to watch at 10 o'clock, hopefully it'll be televised. I partnered together with Rabbi, who's a member of Knesset from Avodah, who's very involved in the high-tech world and helps Haredi get to work. We partnered together, and we're going to have a session for 2 hours in the Knesset where I'm bringing people from the Haredi, Rabbi, Rosh Yeshiva, from the Haredi side, who are going to talk about the needs in the community and help. Thankful that someone is actually at the Knesset level addressing this, and that's what we did. No one's going to, if people want to take issue with my being Haredi, that's fine. No one can possibly take issue with them, and they're saying, thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing. We needed someone to just take this issue and help make it happen. And as Haredi begin to understand what we're demanding, even at the service level, they'll understand there's not going to be civil war, you're not going to have mass numbers going to jail, they'll understand what we're asking for, and I believe that the community, it'll take time, but they'll slowly embrace it, come to terms with it, and realize that it really is the best thing for the community.
But you're still, ultimately, you do want them to do, you want a limited number of exemptions, and you want people to do national service. And let me ask you the devil's advocate question, which is, the army doesn't need them, and they would, by the way, colour the army. They would change the army in a way that might be problematic for people who are not Haredim. And these are people who've chosen a lifestyle because they think modern life is toxic. They want to protect themselves from what they see as the evils of the modern world. And one more thing, which I think is quite easy to bash down, but put up there anyway, the argument that our Torah scholarship generation was destroyed, and of course, then therefore you need to over-invest to help build up the ranks. So those are kind of the points that they would put to you, I suspect.
So, there's three basic dimensions to my answer. One is economic. I'll just talk economics in the moment. The system can't work. The system cannot work. You cannot have a population which, thank God, is having 8 to 10 children per family, will become a majority of the country at some point, and as an ideology, they don't view work as an ethic which is part of their lives. They do not raise their sons, certainly, and even their daughters, it's a little bit minimal, to be able to be part of the workforce. So just economically, the country is possibly the greatest threat to the internal situation in Israel is economic violence. That has to change. There's also the value element. How can you have such a huge percentage of the country that doesn't view themselves as part of the society, not serving as an ideology, not working as an ideology? Who are we as a people if a majority of the country is not that way? Then I come from the Torah side, which is number 3, which is it's just wrong. To say that we don't serve anymore, it's just wrong. I like to say, I think David, King David, who was a righteous person and studied a lot of Torah and was very religious, I think he had some involvement in military affairs in his life. And we have to open the Tanakh and see that. That's part of who we are as a people, is we have an army, we defend ourselves, and we fight for our existence in the land of Israel. And it's just wrong. Now, in terms of why the Haredi community developed this way, there is justification to why they had that approach originally. There's 2 answers. One is the Holocaust, that's before the Holocaust. There was the issue of Hayasham, the old settlement that was living a very spiritual life in Jerusalem and Tzfat and other places, and all of a sudden the secular culture came in, the secular Jews, and their response at the time was to circle the wagons and say, I want no part of this. And I can't blame anyone for having that reaction when they saw this happening. The second part is we said after the Holocaust, there's no question the Torah worlds were destroyed, and there was a feeling of we need to rebuild Torah, and I agree with that. But we've done it. Look at what we've done. I mean, look at the vision of these great rebellion who rebuilt Torah. But now we have to say, so now what's the next step? We rebuilt Torah. What kind of influence are we having on the broader society? My goodness, just 2 weeks out, in the Knesset, the influence that we've had by bringing Torah just on a Knesset level. We could do so much. We could just open the doors and say we're part of broader society, and they haven't done that. And the time has come for that adjustment. And if things play out the way they look right now, again, we don't know. You can wake up tomorrow morning and things are different. But I might be that Haredi voice within the government. And they are not. And that's very important for the country, that they be hearing a voice which says we need to be part of broader society, both in terms of the army, national service, and entering the workforce. And it's not a threat to the Torah world. It's just going to strengthen the Torah world. I went to Ner Yisrael in Baltimore, and Ner Yisrael in Baltimore produces the number of Talmidei Chachamim and people who will be building Torah as the Israeli yeshiva produce. And I went to college during the day. You learn till 4:30, you grab a quick supper, and you go. I went to Johns Hopkins every day. I came back and learned more. And what that does is it forces you that when you're learning, you take your learning far more seriously because you value that time. And it's only going to strengthen the Israeli yeshiva world. It's just going to be a matter of time until it becomes the norm.
I must say, I was very struck when we spoke last time. You told me you were on the radio and you were being questioned about the sort of rabbinical authority for the assertion that people are going to work. And you mentioned the Rambam. I mean, you should tell the story, right? You said,
I'll tell the story.
So, to me, it was dazzling because you invoked the most authentic authority.
Right, so I have my list of sources that I go through to talk about Torah and work, starting with the Torah itself says, Sheshet Yamim Ta'avod, 6 days you should work, and the Svag lists that as one of the 613 mitzvot, then you have to go to work. Then you have the Mishnah, which says that Kol Torah she'eni lo melacha, any Torah without work, Sofa b'telah v'gereret avod. It's you're going to lose your Torah, and it's going to cause sin. Then you have the Gemara, which says, Chayav Adam l'omedet b'no u'manu. You have to teach your son a trade. And I will go down the list of the sources. Then you have the Rambam. This is the most important source. The Rambam says that anybody who chooses to study Torah, and it's important to hear the language, who chooses to study Torah and compels other people to support him, meaning you don't have your own support base. You have your own support base on something else, but you force others to support you. Says the Rambam, that person, Chilelat Hashem, has desecrated God's name, Bizat HaTorah, disgraces Torah, and, going back to the Ravadi story, and has no portion in the world to come. That's my motto. So I quoted it on this radio station, and the radio host says, "You're quoting me on Rambam? That's from 500 years ago. What is the Rambam doing?"
I tell you, I cannot believe that's just unbelievable to me. Now I'm going to tell you something else, which I was very struck by. Where, we always talk about the challenges that face Israel, and then you try and look for things, sources of encouragement. One of the most amazing scenes that I saw was your party colleague, Ruth Calderon, giving her maiden Knesset speech last month. Now she's a former teacher, so like good teachers, she photocopied the material she was going to be teaching in the Knesset, and she was evoking a portion of the Gemara. So she photocopied the page of the Gemara, she gave it out, and the speaker of the session where she was giving her speech happened to be a Shas Chaver Knesset, and she starts giving her maiden speech and talking about the obligations of Knesset members and that she wanted the best and the brightest from any students of Judaism to have access to Jewish texts and so on, and then she starts illustrating with an example from the Gemara, and then the Shas acting speaker interrupted her to make an observation. And some of the, how should we put this, heathen in the Knesset plenum started shouting at her, like, why are you interrupting? She's trying to talk to us here. And she said, look, on the contrary, it's lovely that he interrupted me. And then the other speech, she gave a little tefillah. She said, she read a little prayer that had been written, saying, I hope that we'll do justice to the faith that people put in us, and we'll do our jobs well as Knesset members. And the Shas acting speaker of Parliament says, Amen, when she finished. And that, for me, was like, the wings of I don't know, something wonderful or flattering someone. I thought it was an amazing few moments.
It was, when I saw Ruth get up, I sat the same moment with her in the Knesset, and I saw her Gemara. She had the actual Gemara in her hands. I said, wow, this is a great pride. Really, it's a great pride.
Anything could happen. Tell me, is it not anathema for a woman to be standing up teaching Gemara to some of those Knesset members? And yet, Mr. Vaknin from Shas was quite tolerant.
So a few things. First of all, the HT party, we're members of Knesset, but we've also really become a family. And I say that it's not a campaign now, I'm not asking for your vote. I'm just telling you from the bottom of my heart that you're doing an amazing job in bringing us together and getting to know each other. So I know you well, and I knew that it would just be a beautiful moment. As she walked up, and as David said, we were all passing around on our desks at the Knesset, she's the Gemara that she was going to teach. And in God's sense of humor, by the way, the acting speaker at the Knesset right now is Fuad Ben Eliezer from Labor. Before there's a government forum, it's always the elder statesman of the Knesset. And to Fuad's credit, he sits there for hours, and the Knesset sessions go on for hours. And he sits there, only here or there does he have to be replaced. And right before Ruth's maiden speech, he was replaced, and
not as planned by sheer coincidence.
Not planned. It was God's remarkable sense of humor. And from Shas, and like you said, he didn't really interrupt me. He wanted to say something also about construction. And people didn't. Some people were yelling, "Don't interrupt." I at that point was still very fresh and didn't learn to yell out. I've since learned to do that. Either fortunately or unfortunately, but some of the people yelled out, "Chavruto, study partners," about the two of them together. But it was really a remarkable. It was really a remarkable moment. And the truth is, people are saying that there's been Yesh Atid, this horrible anti-Torah secular party, has expressed more Torah from the Knesset podium than they've ever seen from any party, including the Torah parties. People who I didn't even know. It's an example. Shimon Solomon is an Ethiopian representative. He got up and he said the parsha this week is the parsha of Truma, which talks about the menorah, which has to be made of a solid block of gold. He said, I'm looking at the seats of the Knesset, which are the shape of menorah. He said, hopefully we can all realize that we're all from the same piece of gold and work together. Just beautiful ideas of Torah. People were saying prayers. Yifat Karim, who sits next to me, asked me before she went up. She said she wants to say Tfilat HaDerech, because she's going on a new path. And I told her, okay, and she had written down without God's name, with Hashem. And I said, you can say God's name, just have in mind, you're leaving right afterwards to go on a trip. Yes. And she said it, and amazing things are happening. Our party started the first Torah study session for members of Knesset, in the history of the Knesset. And every Tuesday at 3 o'clock, my staff knows it's the Kodesh Kodashim for me, it's the Holy of Holies. Unless it's an emergency meeting with an ear or a prime minister, I'm there. And we sit around the table, religious and non-religious members of Knesset, and we talk Torah. It is just remarkable to be part of that, and our hope is that that translates into the broader Israeli society.
Okay, I want to ask some questions, and I'm going to bring some of this into the conversation now as well. How do you wish to reconcile the monopoly, the ultra-Orthodox, or the Orthodox that became the ultra-Orthodox monopoly on life cycle events in Israel? What kind of where are the parameters of religion in this curious, unique Jewish state, which is at once our national homeland and also the home of the people who have fealty for the Jewish religion. How do you separate them? Should there be orthodox hegemony over birth, marriage, divorce, death, etc.? What's the agenda?
It's a very complicated issue. That's the first thing. I'm not dodging the question. I'm going to answer it. It's obviously very complex. The first step is that we actually start dealing with it, meaning it's just been avoided. If the third rail of politics in America is Social Security, in Israel it's been a religious state. No one wants to touch it. We as a party began to touch it. We, myself, Rav Shai Caron really is the leader of this. Rav Shai Caron, myself, Eliezer Levi on the religious side, and then Ruth and Yael Berman. Remind me to tell the story of Yael at some point. Yael, who is also from a secular background, and the Meretz Party originally. We've been working on a document for the last few months on religion and state issues, and we have come to our understanding of how we think things should run. Essentially, the party platform is two things. First of all, the Rabbi itself has to become, let's start with the Zionistic, and moderate and embracing. Our party has announced its support for Rav Stav as chief rabbi of Israel, and we'll do everything we can to make that happen. But the next part, which I won't get as much applause for, that's fine. At the same time, we also need to understand that the secular society of Israel feels that there's been a tremendous amount of religious coercion, and as a result, people are being pushed away from Judaism. What I heard throughout the campaign, I actually heard, starting with my involvement with Rabbi Salom, was secular people saying, I hate Judaism, and I hate that I hate Judaism. It struck a real chord inside me. What have we done? We've pushed people away from being proud Jews in the state of Israel. And as a result, and it's our fault, our fault, we have to release some of the reins a little bit. And it's very complicated. It's very complicated. We get to issues where there's discussion in terms of transportation and Shabbat in secular areas, and there's issues of marriage outside of Kedat Moshe Israel, how you should do it. And these are issues that we've studied very, very carefully, and we've worked out what we think is best moving forward, with the balance of the Rabbanut being far more moderate and embracing, but also releasing some of the control. And that's what we're working on right now. It is, if the HFT joins the coalition, it is going to be part of the coalition agreement. Let's remember, we're now working together with our political partners, IKD, and working very closely with them. It's a remarkable relationship for me. Because going into the campaign, all my friends were, it's in the HFT or Rabbi DD, or don't why you were Rabbi DD, that's who you should be, etc. And now we're very close, all of us, and we're working together on that document as well. And there will be a releasing of control over certain areas, but I can tell you, sitting where I'm sitting, it's only going to strengthen Judaism in the long term. It's going to make a prouder Judaism in Israel, and it's going to make sure that we don't have this tension on the streets. You're not going to see people protesting on the streets for these various issues, and that's the best thing that can happen for us, is that we give a little where we need to give in a way where it doesn't hurt the religious side, and hopefully will inspire people to just embrace their Judaism and proud Jews.
And ease the process of conversion?
So with conversion, it's much more complicated. With conversion, you can't say, we'll let this small group do what they want to do, because that impacts everyone.
Well, so does the marriage thing.
With marriage, it actually doesn't, because with marriage, and it's very important for everyone to understand, when you force Kiddushin and Nisuin on someone who doesn't want that, they don't leave their marriages kahalacha. And then you cause mamzerut throughout Am Yisrael, because we're forcing people around the country into getting married in a way that they say the words Kedat Moshe Yisrael, they don't mean it. And then they leave that marriage without the halacha. So it's better if you start analyzing from a halachic perspective for the moment. It's actually better to try to bring people in who want to get married that way, but allow people to don't. But even there, so for example, I'll just explain the nuance. We're not calling it marriage. We're not calling it marriage. It's not marriage. Okay, it's called a civil union. That's a very important statement. What we're saying is that from the Jewish perspective, marriage is the way it always has been, Kiddushin and Nisuin, Kedat Moshe Yisrael. There are people who want to live lives a different way. We can't force them to live our way, but we're at peace with that if it's called a civil union, and people can do their own thing on a civil union level. That's an example, though, of actually having a conversation, sitting down together and figuring out how can we make this work.
But your critics there would say, well, you're then going to produce generations who, when they try to marry other Jews, there's all sorts of problems because because they would have got married outside of the halakhic framework, and actually make that part of it.
Again, without getting into the nuances of halacha, but two people living together outside of the condition of suit is not mamzei root. There's no actual, it's not the same issue halachically as creating mamzei root. But again, I really do believe that if we create that environment, of course there are people who will choose the civil union option. It's a Jewish, you said before, it's a Jewish democratic state. It's a very complex, but we can't force our ideologies on anyone. We just can't. I can't justify it. I love a situation where people really want me, but people disagree with me about religious issues. So I can't force them. And I think that we've done that, and that we'll see a renaissance of excitement about Judaism in general, being proud Jews in the state of Israel as a result. The conversion issue is more complex, and there our conversation has started already, where we could try to formulate a more universal conversion plan, where we on the Orthodox side have to be far more lenient, but there are lenient opinions that can rely on about a lot of things. And then on the other side, people have to realize that every conversion they want to happen can't be recognized, because that's going to cause a real issue if it was a Jew. But we have to begin the process. It's going to take time. The immediate solution we can find, though, I will tell you, is Zara Yisrael. The Russians that are living here, who were persecuted in Russia because they were viewed as Jews in Russia, and are now persecuted here because they're viewed as not Jews. That we can solve very quickly, and God willing, if the coalition which we're talking about forms, I think we will find that those people will be freed to convert to Judaism very quickly, and will wipe away a terrible blot on our history very quickly.
Here's one issue which is where there's a difference, shall we say, between Yeshatid and Yehudi and Jewish Home, which is over the issue of energizing negotiation effort with the Palestinians, readiness to territorial compromise, attitudes to settlements. What's your party's position and your position on that?
So I'll start with my party's position, and I'll talk about the politics in terms of IDOD. Our party position is that we, on the one hand, love Eretz Yisrael, we're connected to Eretz Yisrael. I personally, Beit El, Hebron, these are places which I Itabar, right after the horrible massacre there, I was there. These are places which are part and parcel of Jewish people. There's no question about that, and we're not stuck on the other side. The Palestinians exist. We can't ignore it. There are millions now. We don't do anything about it. There'll be millions down the road. We don't believe that a solution can be found quickly. It's not. We never campaigned on, votes to Glassman will quickly solve a deal. We believe that we have to be in a process of trying to find a solution to the problem. And right now, that solution is 2 states for 2 people. We've been very clear that Yerushalayim cannot be divided. We will not be part of a deal where that takes place. And we have our red lines as well. And that's where we view ourselves as very much a center party. And we ran that campaign, and we're still sticking to that in terms of what we believe. The relationship with IUD, let me just take a step back for a moment. It's not just political convenience. Yair and Naftali definitely have a strong connection with each other. You see it. We see it on a daily basis at the Knesset. And they
know each other particularly well before.
Not particularly well. They had some familiarity, but they very quickly connected to each other. It's actually a funny story. The night of the elections, Yair called Naftali right away, and he got a answering service because Naftali was busy, I guess, with his right. And the woman said, "Can I take who's this, please?" And he said, "It's Yair Lapid calling for Naftali." She said, "Can I take a message, please?" He said, "Yeah, please tell Naftali that Yair called." It was a funny situation where, from that moment, that night, the relationship developed, and it's more than just a matter of convenience right now, from my perspective, for sure. It's complicated. Obviously, politics is complicated, and everyone has to give here and there. I think that Naftali was convinced that Yair is not someone who is running quickly to make some kind of a solution which is going to be detrimental to the state of Israel, and then Yair realizes Naftali's concern as well, and we'll have to walk through that and walk that line together. But the one thing which comes out very clearly is that both of them realize that there's no deal that's going to be made tomorrow. And in the meantime, let's solve the major problems internally. That's really what the alliance is about. The alliance is about 2 parties that said enough is enough. There are real issues that we have to deal with in this country. We agree for the most part about those issues. Let's get that done. And again, we'll see how it plays out this week, but we're certainly hoping that will develop.
Okay, another question that people ask me to ask you. President Obama is coming a week and a half from now. there's this inexplicable situation with Jonathan Pollard, which to anybody who looks from the outside, it simply doesn't make sense. The severity and relentlessness of the punishment. I mean, there have been all kinds of crimes down the years and down the decades that people are punished, and this seems to be inexplicable. So I know you, in the Knesset the other day, made a speech urging that Pollard be granted clemency. Well, what are we missing?
So first of all, but in the speech that I gave, there are subtitles being put to it right now and they'll be released on YouTube this week. It's important for people to hear the message. I actually wanted to speak in English. I felt it was important to use the Knesset podium to speak in English. That was my plan. I had a meeting with Yair about a half hour before I went on into the plenum, and Yair said just double check with the Knesset laws and bylaws if it's okay. And I found out that it's not okay. Only Hebrew or Arabic are allowed, and not English. Unless if there's a visiting dignitary, they can make an allowance for him. So I was not allowed to speak English. It's a complex issue. It was very important for me to stand up in the Knesset and say, I'm not trying to wipe away what Jonathan did. It was very important for me to say he did a crime, it was against the law in America, and he go to jail for that. When it happened, I was 14 years old when Jonathan was arrested, and it was very confusing for me because I said he's a spy for Israel. And I spoke to my father, who was a judge in the federal government in Washington, Virginia, and I asked him that. And my father was he broke the law, he had to go to jail for it. And over time, even my father's perspective changed and said that he served his time. It's very complicated because maybe there are certain things that we don't know. I've been given certain indications within the Knesset that that's the case, but either way, I'm standing.
So strong that deterred you from making that statement?
No, because I do feel that he has served his time, even with that information, which I won't get into. He has served his time, and as I said from my speech, I said, President Obama, please don't let Jonathan die in jail. That would be the greatest travesty. Let him live whatever years he has left in freedom. And we're doing whatever we can. The Knesset is certainly doing whatever it can. And it's a complicated issue with the relationship with the United States. And a lot of people are asking us to do far more. And not to have a relationship with President Obama. And going further, the relationship has to be there. It's important for the country, and you have to find that balance. But it's very complicated. And it's very painful. It's very painful. Let me just mention also, Yair was very startled by this. He had a meeting with Esther Pollard in the Knesset. And while he was there, Jonathan doesn't know when he'll get rights to the telephone. So this wasn't planned beforehand. While Yair was meeting with Esther, she got a phone call from Jonathan, and she handed the phone to Yair. He came right into our faction meeting right after that, and he was visibly shaken, and I think it still stuck with him. Hearing Jonathan's voice had a big impact on him, and we as a party are simply on board and doing whatever we can to try to get it.
No indication that anything's going to change.
No indication. I have no indication from within the Knesset that anything's going to change.
I have two more questions for you. The first of which is your party leader, of whom you speak in strikingly glowing terms, obviously. On the one hand, you would, but even as somebody who's embarked on this career because of him, it is striking to me how full of admiration you are with him. There's been a sense, I think, when you talk, as he has done, about his ambition to be Prime Minister before he's even taking a seat in the Knesset for the first time, and saying the next time he thinks he will be Prime Minister. Is there not a bit of arrogance in there? And is this the kind of honeymoon period for Yesh Atid, where everything's looking good and you handle the pre-election tactics, I think, very astutely? If, for example, Yesh Atid had allied with Labour and Hatzimah, I think it would have cost a lot of votes. So I think the tactics were good before, and the alliance since the elections has obviously been effective. But are you being led by an arrogant person? And are we going to come back and look at this and say, oh, he said all these lovely things that night in the Jerusalem Synagogue, and really it was business as usual after that?
Wow, so there's a few different questions there. Okay, first of all, in terms of Yair himself, that story with Yair saying he's Prime Minister, and everything has to be put into a context, and it's important to hear the context. There was a program that followed him throughout the campaign, and the show was their final interview. After they went through the entire campaign, they said to him at the end of the interview, do you see yourself as Prime Minister one day? So there wasn't a press conference call where Yair decided to announce, ladies and gentlemen, I hereby throw my hat to the ring as Prime Minister one day. They asked him that question, and he answered, yeah, one day I'll do myself as Prime Minister. So I think it's a very fair answer. People have asked me, in various interviews, do you see yourself as a minister of the government one day, not now, one day? I said, it very possibly could come out that way. I'm not aspiring towards it at the moment, but it could turn out that way. It's possible. So that's, first of all, just to be fair to him. As a member of his party, of course I want my leader to say that one day he views himself as Prime Minister of the country. He views himself as a leader who wants the party to grow from 19 seats even further, and certainly polls right now would indicate that we could. And I'm very proud of the fact that he sees himself that way. Just again from the inside, someone who spends time with him and knows him, most important thing is he speaks the truth. He speaks the truth and he's been consistent from day one in my relationship in terms of that. He has a vision for the country, he has a passion for the country, he's a Zionist, he loves Israel, he understands the role Israel plays in the broader Jewish world, and as a result I do think he has the tools, together with his ability to speak and inspire and everything else, to be a Prime Minister one day. In terms of arrogance, I think that anybody in these roles has to have a healthy dose of arrogance. Not arrogance that leads you to lead people astray, but arrogance which says, yeah, I believe that I can take this country to a great place. You have to have a little bit of arrogance to feel that. Part of the challenge is to find that balance. Even to speak openly as a member of Knesset, you have to find that balance. You walk halls and people give you all kinds of kavod and they treat you in a different way. And you go places and you're recognized, and you have to try to remain humble. My father had a cartoon in his office, which I now have in my office, which is a judge talking to another judge. And it says, "At home, I'm a total idiot. I come to work, put on a black robe, and by God, I'm it." So I have that sitting in my office because I want to remember that. It's really important to remember that you're just the same person, but you have a role that you're playing. I think that Yair sees himself that way. I forgot the rest of your question.
Well, honeymoon.
Oh, honeymoon, I'm sorry. I think if you look at how Egypt has handled these negotiations for coalition, you see a change, which I hope people from the outside really understand. They were offered, they sat down the first meeting, we'll give you the following portfolios. And our negotiating team said, we're not interested in portfolios. And the response was, what? You're not interested in portfolios? That's how Israeli politics works. They promise the following ministries and then you join the coalition. And we said, we're not interested. Do you accept our values and our programs or not? And it broke down. It literally broke down over there for weeks. There was no further discussion about it. We said, if we have to go to the opposition because we stand for our values, we go to the opposition with our heads held high. And people have asked me, aren't you nervous? Aren't you tense? You might not be in the government. No, it's fine. And I think that we've shown that politics can be done that way. To their credit, Rabbi did the same thing. And Naftali did the same thing, was offered portfolios. And they said, but what about the issues? We're not interested in joining a government just for, say, by the way, I've learned from this process, and David, please forgive me for saying this, you cannot believe what you read in the news. Friends, I have the exception of this. I have seen with my own eyes stories develop in front of my eyes. Behind the Knesset is an area where you can hang out together, members of Knesset. I've seen it in front of my eyes, and you see it recorded completely different. I've been with personalities who are talking. I was hearing them talk at the same time on various news agencies and saying that something else is happening. So it's just very clear to me, we've really shown that politics can be done differently. In our party office, in our meeting room, every party has a picture which captures their party. So the Labour Party has a picture of Yitzhak Rabin, a very big picture behind Sheli Yaakobovich. The Likud Party has a very big picture of Menachem Begin behind the Prime Minister. So it's a big question. Who are we? We're a new party. Who are we going to put behind Yair? So Yair shows the very famous picture of David Ben-Gurion standing on his head on the beach. I don't know if you've seen it, but for us as members of Knesset in our faction meetings, we're talking about very serious things, but we're looking at Yair, and behind him is Ben-Gurion on the beach on his head. It's quite humorous to see, but we really are trying to turn politics on its head. We're trying to be a new type of politics. Our word is our word. But we're saying to the Prime Minister right now that we want to form a stable 4-year government to move forward. We're not going to be a party which every week is threatening to pull out because we really want this to happen, and we really feel for him we can really get things done in 4 years from now. You can see a very different country. Again, it might not happen, and we'll go to the opposition. and like I said, we'll fight for what we believe in the opposition, and that's the way it has to be. But we are a party that was built on these values. All 19 of us are on board with those values, and that's what we plan to work for. So I don't even have a moment's hesitation that people will say, oh, we've let down our voters, we've done something different, and we've proven that during the most crucial time of the day. This is the time when you backtrack on your values. This is the time when you backtrack on your party's platform. And we haven't done that. We have a file this big of what we hope to bring into a government if we join. Like I said, if we don't, we'll fight for the opposition.
I'm going to do two actually. First of all, I want to ask you, one of the pledges was to change the electoral system, but it kind of worked quite well for you, right?
Well,
do you think we should change the system? I mean, what you said at the very beginning about not having anyone representing Beth Shemesh, for example, that's the other side of the standard. There is no constituency accountability. So
great. First of all, in terms of the electoral system, we risked going to the opposition over this issue. The last government had 30 ministries which we actually asked the various ministers. They give a report over the last 4 years, so the HFT was at every session of those reports. And at the end, someone from the HFT every time got to the microphone and said, can you tell us how your ministry is different from that ministry? That was our question. And we wanted to have other ministries. And we were willing to go to the opposition over that. And if we go in, it'll be reduced significantly. There's already talks about having to take apart there's a second government table in the Knesset that's taken apart now because we're making less ministries. And one of our demands, if we join the government, is that we vote very quickly that next time it's no one from the dance that there's no more than 18 ministries as a chok yesod. Chok yesod is a, even though we have a constitution, but it's a constitutional right.
Basically, your demand for 18 is not going to be met. This time there will be a reduction, and the next time there will be.
Correct. We never said in the elections that we're demanding, we would only go in for 18. We said we demand a reduction, and then for next time 18. We already have a law that member of Knesset Mickey Levy, who's known in Jerusalem, he initiated that law to raise the threshold, and hopefully that law will pass as well. So baby steps towards making the changes, but we definitely want to change even though we're starting to manage. Our demand for less ministers means that we have less ministers. But that's better for the country, and we really want to stick to that. In terms of local representation, this is something you might not know, but you should know. HFT divided the country into regions. If you go on the HFT website, you go onto your region on the map, and you will see who is your member of Knesset from HFT, not based on where they live geographically, but they're responsible. So I'm responsible for 4 different regions, and emails come to us from that site, and the party actually is watching to make sure that we respond to those requests.
Who's the Jerusalem HFT?
Myself together with Mickey Levy. So I'm one of them, so you can certainly turn to us, but I also have Gush Etzion, I have Marel Yavim, I have the Yam HaMelech area, I have part of the Galil, and our job is every Thursday, we're supposed to go out every single Thursday and watch it to make sure that we're out in our region, doing a tour, meeting the people there, doing a town hall, and so we take this issue of representation very seriously. Passing a law in the Knesset to divide the Knesset to regions wouldn't pass, because we need that members of Knesset lose their jobs, so we're being realistic, so we did the best that we could, and we divided the country to these regions.
Okay, my final question now, to become a member of Knesset, you had to relinquish your American citizenship, which you told me about, but I think you should tell me there. Difficult for you? A proud and wonderful moment? That's the law. You have to give up.
It's Israeli law. It's Israeli law. It was very difficult. They did me a favor at the embassy, and they had me come when the embassy was closed for the public to come. So I was by myself, which was nice in terms of that dimension. It was actually humorous because I had to go up to aisle number 1, and then they said, please have a seat. And then one said, Rabbi Lipman, please go to aisle number 2. And there's no one in the room. But I went from one to the other. Signing the form was it was difficult, but I was able to do it. Signing the form. Paying a huge amount of money was difficult to do it. But then they called me to the side room when I was really by myself. I was with Elisa and with a member of the embassy staff, and there was a side room by myself, and there was this, I felt so bad for the clerk in the embassy on the other side of the glass, and she said to me, please raise your right hand. I said, no, I have to say this? She said, you raise your right hand, and I actually raised my right hand, and I actually couldn't say the words that I was renouncing myself. I couldn't say it. So I made her cry, and she said, take a few moments, you need to. It was very difficult to do. America gave my father's side of the family a place to run to from pogroms in Russia, and the mother's side of the family after the Holocaust, a place where we could live as religious Jews with pride and never experience a moment of anti-Semitism, and we flourish as a family. And the words that I say mean something. When I say something, I mean it. I don't just say things. And I felt when I was doing it, I felt like I was an immigrant, showing I renounced. It's strong words to say. And but I said them, and they punched a hole through my passport and sent it back to me. And I will say that a few hours later, thinking about it, there was something quite remarkable about thinking about that. After 2,000 years, I'm the person in my family who has 100% Israeli citizenship. That was really, just thinking about it was remarkable to me.
I'd like to end there. I want to thank you all for coming again. I think you covered an awful lot of ground. I made you speak an awful lot there and didn't speak so much myself, so I thought, you're a politician, and that's what you do, right? I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank my friend, Rabbi, Lipman, for the very best. Thank you very much.